Hello, everyone. Thank you for showing up tonight. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And I'm here tonight with Terry Cowdrey and Ellen Whalen, and I will introduce them in a minute. But tonight we're going to talk about college essays and give the perspective of how the admissions office uses college essays in the process, and then some tips about how your student can get started thinking about topics that they want to write about, and just kind of the process of developing their essays and starting to plan them out. So just a little housekeeping before we officially get started. Would love if people can put in the chat what year their student is. I imagine most people here have that 11th grader, depending on where you are in the country. Maybe your school is finishing up and you're starting to call them rising seniors, but this is the summer. And if anybody has started, if their student has started thinking about essays, working on essays, and if you haven't, don't worry, don't panic. And if you just want to share something about like where you are in the process of college admissions. Have you gone on any tours? Have you created a college list? My personal favorite question is, have you talked about a college budget? But so those are just things I'm going to throw out that people can or should be starting to do. And other little logistics is that this is recorded. We will send a link tomorrow. And technically, everybody here, this is a Facebook. This is a Zoom meeting, not a webinar. It functions very similar to a webinar, but if you want to put on your video, which there's no pressure, but we like to see people's faces. So you can turn your video on and, just do a quick wave to us. You can also unmute yourself if you have like a question that is easier for you to share. Thank you. Easier for you to share verbally than in the chat. And throughout tonight, please put your questions in the chat. I'm going to monitor the chat as Terry and Ellen go through slides and give you their advice and insight. And depending on the question, I might interrupt them, or if not, we're going to go through questions at the end. And last time we were actually pretty good from a timing perspective. So we really are going to try and get through Ellen and Terry's slides and advice and answer your questions, and really hopefully finish up within an hour, maybe just over an hour. So that's our goal. Okay, yes, because I know we always debate, this is 8:30, it's 8:30 Eastern time, but we do it because we want to get other time zones in. But, for us East Coasters, it does start to get a little late. So, okay, so let me do a quick intro of Terry and Ellen, and then they'll probably expand on their experience. But we have worked, I guess it's about a year now with Terry, and it's been great. Terry has over 40 years of experience in college admissions and enrollment. She's served as Vice President for Enrollment and Dean of Admissions at both St. Lawrence University and Colby College. And then as of the past 10 years, she's been doing enrollment management for a whole host of colleges. And right now, you're currently doing some consulting work with RPI. Is that correct?
Correct.
Terry, and what I love about all your experience, maybe even in the past 10 years, is just like going and working at so many different colleges. You see so many different ways that colleges are approaching the process, and it just it's probably personal from my perspective. It's even like more insight than just somebody who might have spent their whole career at one place. So we love having Terry, and Ellen has been, or it currently is, what we call a counselor in residence for Road to College. And Ellen, we've been working together about 5 years now, right? But Ellen has been working, since 2017 with families, guiding them on the college admissions process. She's a member of IECA and HECA. And for those of you who don't know that, those are the professional organizations that independent college counselors are members of. And Ellen has a wealth of experience and expertise, particularly in essays, and she'll explain to you her background from writing and editing. And she is our go-to expert when it comes to the Common App, which we'll touch on a little bit today, but we'll talk on later on in the summer on more detailed sessions about how you fill out the Common App. So with that, Terry, if you want to add anything more to your experience, we'd love to hear. And then also, we like having slides, so Terry's going to share her slides and walk through, her perspective. Terry and Ellen and I were talking right before we got on, and we kind of like that. Terry has tremendous experience on the admission side, so you're kind of like hearing how the colleges use essays in the process of admissions, and Ellen has a tremendous amount of experience working directly with students and helping them develop their applications and essays. So we've hopefully given you both sides of the process to give you as much insight as possible.
Great, thanks so much, Debbie. And welcome everyone tonight. I'm impressed looking at the comments in the chat at what you all are doing and have been doing with your, particularly with those of you who have junior students. So as Debbie said, I've worked in college admissions for a long time. And I have been at all kinds of schools, public and private, small and large, comprehensive universities and liberal arts colleges, working right now with Rensselaer Polytechnic, so an primarily engineering school, although their curriculum is much more like a university with lots of choices. And so we want to talk a little bit to start off tonight about holistic admissions and what that means, and then specifically how the essays are playing into that holistic admissions process. We'll give some advice about do's and don'ts. I know someone already asked the question about, are there topics that you should steer away from, and or maybe topics that are good ones to focus on, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Ellen's got a case study to share, and we'll talk also about some timeline kinds of advice and pointers there. So with holistic admissions, really what this is talking about is the fact that at colleges that are very popular, they have more applications than they can possibly admit and enroll students from. And they not only have many applications, but they also have applications primarily from students who are very strong academically. And so as a result, they are considering not only the academic credentials that a student presents, but also the personal credentials. And they're doing that again because they're trying to decide among highly qualified students to decide which students are going to offer admission to. Even the academic review at most colleges is in itself considering a variety of elements. So you see on the left side of the slide, the sort of green circle in the middle is the high school profile. And really what that is we're looking at what's been available to the student and what have they taken advantage of through their 4 years of high school. 9th through 12th is considered. If a student is homeschooled, we'll look at what they've done through their homeschooling curriculum. And also perhaps in many cases, homeschooling students will then take advantage of some online classes or local community college classes. But the typical applicant is in secondary school, and they're presenting to us their academic transcript, the courses they've taken. We know the rigor of the courses by how they're labeled on the transcript and explained by the high school in the profile. We see the grades that the student has achieved, and we look at the trend of the grades that the student has had over the typically 6 or 7 semesters that we're reviewing. And then at some schools, test scores are required, that being SAT or ACT. At other schools, test scores are optional. And so some students will include their test scores as part of their academic portfolio. Other students will choose not to include their test scores as they're presenting their credentials to the colleges. In the pink, you see on the left side several other elements. The first is the LOR, which is the letter of recommendation. And the letter of recommendation typically, and sometimes there are multiple letters, tell us both something about the student academically, if it's written by a teacher, but also about how the student is as a citizen within the school community, particularly typical of those letters written by the school counselor. Sometimes we'll have letters from a coach or an advisor to a student organization, or from an employer if a student has been working either in the summers or during the school year. But the letters of recommendation, then the extracurriculars and experiences that a student's had, that can be school activities, activities in the community, it could be hobbies, travel experiences perhaps that the students had, sometimes with their family, might be summer jobs. As I mentioned, many students do have jobs in the summer, or other kinds of things they've done. All of those elements, the things that a student is interested in, are things that the college is looking at when they're a college that is practicing this holistic review. And then the last hexagon there is the essays. And we learn not only how a student is as a writer in terms of expressing themselves, but we hope to learn something about the student and what they value through the essay that they submit. Some colleges require one essay, some require multiple essays, and there certainly are colleges out there that don't include essays at all. But tonight we're really talking more about the selective college, those that do require at least one essay. All of this information about each student who has applied to the college is reviewed in the bigger context of what is the institution's priorities and what's the culture of that institution. Because at base, each college is serving its own interests, right? Each college has its own priorities. Sometimes those are academic in nature. If a college has expanded its curriculum and added certain academic areas, they're going to be looking for students to populate those. If a college is trying to enroll more students from outside the region in which it's located, that might be an institutional priority. So there are a variety of things that work into it. But when you look on the right-hand side of the slide and you see the two circles, you can see that the academic review is much larger as a circle than the personal review. You have to always remember that all colleges are schools first. That is their reason for being. It's to provide an education and educational opportunities to the students who enroll. So the college admissions office is charged with identifying which students have the academic foundation and preparation to be ready to enter that college classroom, and with reasonable amount of effort on the student's part, be successful. And so the college admissions office is both assessing achievement that a student has demonstrated thus far, and to the degree possible, intellectual ambition. Is this a student who's going to take responsibility for sampling the opportunities and taking on the educational challenges that are available at the school? So the academic review, again, is larger than the personal review, but the personal review is still an important piece of it. And it's particularly important for any college that has a residential element. And most of the colleges that are holistic in their review process are. Not all of them are, but most of them are. So the academic review, as I said, the very first question is, can the student handle the academic expectations that the college presents? Have they demonstrated through high school that they've taken the appropriate courses and earned grades that would suggest that they will, again, be successful at that college? I've mentioned some of this before, but I think bears repeating that we're looking at the grades a student has earned, the specific courses they've taken, both the kinds of courses, English, math, social studies, world languages, etc., but also the rigor of those courses if the school offers IB courses or advanced placement or honors or those sorts of things. Has the student, if calculus isn't offered at the high school, is the student perhaps taking calculus through a local community college? What are they showing for initiative there? The trend of grades is very important, with the grades closest to college being the most important. So that is senior year fall, junior year spring, junior year fall, going backwards so that ninth grade is the least important of the grades that the student has had over time. You do apply to college before you complete senior year in most cases. But we do also require, for when you choose a college to enroll at, the students provide their final transcript with proof of graduation and those final grades. And we will review those grades at the end of senior year. So they're important as well. But in terms of making the admissions decision, it's fall of senior year that we're looking at most closely. Again, not all colleges require letters of recommendation. If it is something that is optional, it's something a student can choose whether or not to send. My big advice here is do not send more than are asked for. That is sometimes something that families feel they ought to do, and it is not something that will be helpful in the evaluation of the student. So as we look at all of these academic features, we'll have some students who are at the very top of our college profile. And what St. Lawrence University's college profile is going to be different from George Washington University's profile, or different from the University of Chicago's profile. Every school is different, but you will know these are the students who are strong in our area, within our context of students who come to our school. And then there'll be some that are satisfactory. Absolutely, students we know will do well on our campus, but they're not quite as strong as some of their peers. And then there will be a portion of students who apply each year who don't make it above that academic bar, who we just believe are not prepared to be successful at our school based on what they present to us. We put together this example to try to make it a bit more tangible as you're thinking about what I've just described. So in our example here, as the college receives 30,000 applications for admission for its first year class. 15,000, 50% of them pass the academic review. They are in either that strong or satisfactory category based on their academic credentials. As we then look at their essay, their extracurriculars, their personal qualities, we whittle that 15,000 down to 1,800. And so obviously that's a big process for us to choose the 1,800 students who we think are the strongest. But 1,800 is too many for this college to admit. They don't want to enroll a class that's going to be bigger than they can handle. So what they do in their admissions committee is they take 1,400 of the 1,800, the 1,400 that are the strongest, and they go ahead and put those into the admit bin. They take 400 of the 1,800 and say, we're going to discuss these as a committee of admissions officers, and we're going to choose from these 400 students in the committee review, 250 of them to add into that admit bin. So they'll have the 1,400 that got in initially, and the 250 will also be added. And when I say got in initially, what I'm really saying is got put into that bin initially. All 1,650 of these students are treated the exact same way once they are admitted and are notified. Now, they might be treated differently for scholarships or financial aid, but as far as admissions is concerned, there's no difference between someone who gets admitted directly versus someone who gets admitted through that committee review process.
Terry, can I just point out,
Sure.
I think what's helpful about, this slide and your description and even the slide before, and you've said this phrase before, is that uh, these colleges might be going through what you were describing as a holistic review, but the kind of the denial part of the process isn't necessarily holistic. And so that's kind of what this shows, really kind of off the bat, the 15,000, students of this pool who might not have met the academic bar for this school, their whole application is not going to be read.
Right.
So it's only if you get to a certain point in this process that more of your application is going to be read, and really then it weighs more because you've kind of already passed the academic part of the process.
That's important clarification, that Debbie, thank you. Yes, absolutely true that it really, the personal review only comes into play for those who make it over sort of that academic review hurdle. In this example, we of the 400 that went to the committee review, 250, as I said, were added into the admit bin, and 150 were waitlisted. This is not a very realistic number about the waitlist, to be honest. There are usually, at many colleges of this size and this selectivity rate, many more students are put on the waitlist than 150, but it was the example I had for tonight. At this particular college, you have only a 5.5% admit rate, and that might seem crazy to some of you in terms of how low that admit rate is. It is highly unusual. The average admit rate for a private college in the US is 68%. That's 68. But this year, for the regular decision students, Notre Dame, Columbia, Yale, Amherst, all were under a 6% admit rate. And so that's real numbers reported by those colleges. So though this is highly unusual, if your son or daughter is thinking about a school like Columbia, this is something that would be a reality for the process that their application would be going through. So we'll get more into more detail with essays, but I've mentioned this a bit, that, again, many colleges require at least one. And the important thing here is bullet 3. Sometimes they're not required for the admissions process at certain colleges, but they will be required as part of a scholarship application. And it's really important that as your sons and daughters are going through kind of their list making and decide on the places where they're going to submit applications, that they make sure that they have double checked what the requirements are for scholarship review, as well as for applying for admission. And essays are more important and less important in different circumstances. So we've already talked about at the highly selective and selective colleges, they're absolutely going to be important for those students who meet the academic criteria that the school is looking for. They also can be quite important for a borderline candidate, even at a college that might admit 68% of the students who apply. At that type of college, they are looking to admit, obviously, they are admitting 2/3, but for some students who may have had a rockier transcript, that really strong essay could help them if they're on the border. Merit scholarships, I've mentioned. An honors program at a particular college may be the admissions essay that helps that honors program. Usually it's faculty who would then be reading the essay to choose which students will be in an honors program. In certain competitive majors, the essay can be important. Some of you may know that at large universities, some of the students or some of the programs require the student to apply directly to the major they're interested in studying. And then it's also important at public universities when you're an out-of-state student. So this year for the University of Virginia, The students who were residents of Virginia were admitted at a 23%. So basically 1 in 4 of the candidates from the state of Virginia were admitted, whereas out-of-state students were admitted at a 13% rate. So again, the essays could be very important for out-of-state spots at a public university. They are less important at schools where that are less selective and the student is an outstanding academic student, right? And when I say outstanding, I mean outstanding in the profile of the particular college where they're applying. They tend to be less important for an in-state student at a public college or university, or for a less competitive major. Again, the essay is unlikely to be as important as because they're going to be focused on admitting to that major all of the students who meet the academic criteria. Important to know that there are different people who read applications, and though the center bullet, admissions officers traditionally were the primary readers of applications, and still I would say are the primary readers. Many colleges and universities hire professional readers to review applications. I worked at Trinity in Hartford several years ago, and we had 4 outside readers in addition to the admissions officers who read. When I worked at George Washington University about a decade ago, we had 24 outside readers who read applications along with the admissions staff. So that's an important thing to just be aware of. And then faculty. Again, this is something that lots of folks are less familiar with, but now it's been about 20 years since I worked at Vanderbilt University, but at Vanderbilt, the faculty were very involved with the admissions process, particularly as we were choosing students for our merit scholarship programs. Good topics and bad topics. This is something Ellen will talk a little bit more about, but a few things that I just like to share. The topic you choose is less important than the approach you take. Lots of students who are student athletes in high school will write about an athletic experience. Probably one of my favorite essays I've read about an athletic experience was a young woman talking about being on the team bus headed to an away game, and talked about her role on the team and her teammates and the anticipation of the game ahead. So it's thinking about the approach you're going to take. Always answer the so what question. Make sure that you are leading your reader to the conclusion that you want them to draw. Ask yourself if anyone else you know could have written that exact same essay. I often think of this as the French Club Goes to Paris essay, where if you talk about, on the first day we went to the Eiffel Tower and on the second day we ate croissants. Lots of the students on that trip could write that essay. And so it's important that the student insert themselves and their reactions to things into their essay. Some colleges will give you the opportunity to use a paper written for another purpose. I have never found that to be particularly effective. That could be me personally as a reader, but I think that the college process is one that should be kind of given the attention it deserves, and in terms of writing an essay specifically to share something of yourself with the college admissions office. And then my best advice about what to avoid is I don't think I've ever read an effective essay about a student's love life. Just whether it's you've met the love of your life or the love of your life has just left you, it doesn't typically work very well. One question that's come up before we just wanted to touch on briefly, and again, Ellen may talk about this, the question about how we're using AI in terms of reviewing our essays. We do use AI detectors some when the essay's voice is not consistent with the rest of the application or when the topic is very impersonal. And so even schools that admit the vast majority of the students who apply may check those essays. Some colleges will require a student to write an explanation or have a conversation about where did they get their idea for their essay, how did they develop it. Some will ask the student to submit an additional essay if they feel that there's been, it's unlikely the student has authored it themselves. But there are other colleges that I'm aware of right now that are not following up. I guess what I would say is, to the extent that we have tested essays that we believe were written almost exclusively with AI's help, um, they don't tell us much about the student. They tend to be very impersonal. I think the effective use of AI might be for a student to, in fact, start their process using AI to help with their getting their thoughts onto paper, but then they have to do sufficient editing to really make it their voice and their story. And then it's a tool not so different from Grammarly or spell check or those kinds of things. But again, it can be used as a tool. It shouldn't be used to replace the student's own effort. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Ellen share for the rest of our talk.
Thank you. Have to get my slideshow going. So Debbie, can I just start sharing? Is it ready to go? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Slideshow. Right. Can everyone see that?
No, not yet. It's not coming through.
All right, so let me hit escape. So you're sure that I have access because I'm running the slideshow.
Yeah. Do you see the share button at on Zoom? You have to
Okay,
go
so you want me to hit share? Sorry. Last time I
Yeah.
didn't remember grabbing the share. Okay. I know how to grab the share. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now you can see it. Got
Yes.
it. I sent you a slideshow. I thought you could magically give me share. All right, here we are. Okay, so in the Common App, there are two types of essays. Most colleges, not all of them, but most colleges require the Common App. Which also goes, the Common App personal statement, which also can be called the main essay. Some less selective colleges might not ask for a personal statement. The more competitive the college, the more likely they're going to also have supplemental essays. They also can be called college-specific essays. So which one is more important? The more competitive the college, the more the college specific essay might be more important, because that can help a student to stand out and distinguish themselves even more. And colleges want to know if a student really understands what is unique about that particular college and what aspects of the college the student is going to avail themselves of to make the most use of all the different academic programs and extracurricular programs a college has. So they're both important, but a lot of people don't give as much weight to supplemental essays when it comes to putting effort into it. And I will get more into that. So some of these mistakes are what Terry mentioned, so I'm not going to put a lot of time into that. But one of the things I've seen for common essay mistakes are that some students just feel like it's a brag sheet and they just list all the different things they've done. And there are a couple things about that. They don't come across as being very likable. Colleges want students who are going to be kind and engage in campus. And so right off the bat, the admissions officer is like, this person isn't exactly, speaking to me. And then it just doesn't give, it should be a story. So that's a reason not to do that. They have 10 spots to highlight their activities in the Common App. They don't need to do that in the personal statement. There should be reflection going on, not just a running list of activities. So a common mistake I see more often than not, besides depression, which I get a lot of first essay drafts on depression, is that a lot of students spend a lot of time on their early part of their life and very little time on today or in high school. So they want to know much more about how maybe one event that when they were before high school possibly has informed their life today, or events in high school. Another issue I see is a lot of students can be rambling. They really need to be pointed. There are only 650 words in the personal statement. Some of the supplemental essays can be as tight as 50 to 100 words. And so every word should count, and to write succinctly really takes effort. And writing is rewriting, so many drafts. And another issue is I just see really long paragraphs. So short paragraphs are easier for admissions officers to read quickly because they are board speed readers. And the student wants to remember who their audience is. It's probably admissions officer in their mid-20s to maybe someone who's in their 60s is reading it. So it's a wide range, so they should keep their language accessible. All right, so personal statement essay topics to consider. So first of all, a student should start by brainstorming, and they can talk to their parents and friends and say, what do you think's special about me? Are there any stories that stand out in your mind about me? So that can be one approach. Another one is to write down, like brainstorming, just putting 21 facts down about themselves that maybe their friends might not know, to see if there's interesting fodder there to build upon. And it might be some kind of great opening that could be used. And look at the Common App questions, because they are really good for brainstorming, just getting students thinking about, like, one might be about, tell us about a challenge you've overcome. So look at those. And so there are two approaches generally. One is using a chronological approach, so starting with their childhood and moving up into high school, versus a montage. A montage could be considered a little bit like, think of a hamburger. You have the bun at the top and the bottom. So the student starts with a story and ends with that story. And in between, there are different stories going on. So a really simple example is if a student is in their bedroom and maybe they've got pictures on their wall, and they happen to be thinking, they happen to look over at the pictures, and they then tell the story of the different pictures. The photos, like maybe they won an award in one of them. Maybe it's all tied together through the lens of science. They're really into science, so they won a science award, and maybe they built something, in another photo, or maybe they're with their grandfather, and their grandfather got them into science activities. So that's kind of the lens, and then they would come back to being in their bedroom again, and that might not be the most exciting beginning and ending, but some kind of approach like that. I'm going to give you an example later on of a good montage approach. So the essays should show growth and reflection through storytelling. So storytelling is very important in this process. And that's what helps the essays to stand out and be unique. A lot of students will tell what's going on in the essay as opposed to describing it. Again, that storytelling element. They want to bring in all their different senses to just make it more engaging. And by doing that, the student's voice is going to come through. And even if they take a common topic, it's going to be less common through the details. And they should also read their essay out loud to listen for mistakes and use, Grammarly, check the grammar and spelling. There's no reason to have mistakes in this day and age. So looking at college-specific essay tips or the supplemental essays, it's important to really read the question the college is asking a few times to make sure they understand it, because sometimes two questions are buried into one question. And the most common example of that is why this college and why your major could be two questions merged into one essay, and they need to address both of them. It's very important to do research on the college and really dig into it so that they can show the college that they took some time to get to know the college and why, in turn, they feel they're a good fit for the college. And that would be, again, then in turn, using specific details. They can mention clubs, professors, classes, special programs, Those just help to show that the student took some time. These cannot be rushed. And they can reuse some material regarding maybe an opening story, something attention grabbing, but really it's got to be unique to each college. So reuse of material is limited. And I've heard admissions officers say that sometimes a student will recycle an essay and forget to change the college. And I've heard them say that's a deal breaker. If they leave the other college on their essay that's supposed to be for a different college, they're like, oh, well, they can be looking for a reason, the highly competitive colleges, to say no to students because they have more applicants than they can use. So don't give them an opportunity. So starting with an attention catching opening line is very important. Again, they're board speed readers. You want to get them to slow down. So if you Google Stanford Magazine, September 2008, it was a great article about different standout first lines and application essays. And here are 4 that I took from the relatively short article. And the first one is, I'd never seen anyone get so excited about mitochondria. Second one is, some fathers might disapprove of their children handling noxious chemicals in the garage. Next one is, when I was in 8th grade, I couldn't read. And the last one is, I changed my name each time I placed an order at Starbucks. So all different approaches, but interesting. I would like to continue to read on. All right. So if you would like good examples of Common App or personal statement essays, you can Google the college name and essays that worked. Johns Hopkins, Hamilton, and Connecticut College all have a number of good essay examples of students they accepted. So thoughts on essay writing and AI. The Common App defines AI fraud as submitting substantial content or output of an artificial intelligence platform, technology, or algorithm. Some say using AI to outline to generate ideas of an essay is okay. But one of the things is AI makes essays sound very similar, and they use words that students might not use, like cornerstone or bedrock.
So Alan, somebody did ask a little earlier, and I think this is a good time to ask you with what you just on the slide. What do you think the difference is between a student using AI to help write their essay versus a student maybe working with a writing coach to write their essay?
Well, when I work with a student, I just keep asking questions and digging more deeply, and kind of like Terry was saying, so what? So you did this, but why does it matter? Or could you go into more detail? And it's more organic, and it is unique to the student, and
Didn't you
it's not.
actually have a story where a student you were working with and you asked them to write down a lot of things, and she wrote down something that she had never said to you? Was she colorblind? Was that what, or
She had synesthesia. I had her do the 21 things about herself. Yeah.
right, which
Yes.
wouldn't necessarily come up if she was
Yes.
trying to do her essay with AI.
Yes, and it ended up being the first thing she put on the list of 21, because often it might be like the 19th one they put down that could be interesting. And yes, her whole essay became all about that, and she ended up getting a full ride. But she wanted to be a filmmaker, so it became the basis that her essay was all about how she sees the world differently. Because when you have synesthesia, in her case, when she hears music, she sees colors. So because the wires in the brain are crossed in an interesting way. Anyway, so yes, that's an example of that would never have come out using AI. Okay, I'm going to move on if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, so now we're going to look at a sample student. I use this student when I go through the Common App. I have a whole Common App. I fill out the Common App with the student, putting in all the activities that he's done. And the point is to just show that every student has a narrative, and how do the activities support the major the student is interested in studying, and the characteristics, their individual characteristics, and we want to have all this be conveyed in the writing. So the student I made up it's a profile of a lot of young men I see, a mixture of them. And so this particular student is named Jack, and he goes to public school. He has a GPA unweighted of a 3.9 with 7 APs, so he's got good grades and rigor. His SATs are decent with, higher in math, he wants to be an engineer, so that's good to see. And he's taken AP Physics and AP Calc. Colleges would want to see that if he wants to be an engineer, that he can hit the ground running. And hopefully, he's gotten good grades in them. And he's also gone out of his way to take online classes. And so many students are in the National Honor Society, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't help a student really to stand out. Varsity soccer team he happens to be on, and he's in student government and involved with composting at his school. Outside of school is where we're going to see how he is very different. A lot of students look like Jack from the school lens, but outside of school, he's different. So he's earned the Eagle Scout Award. The way he did that was his grandmother was having issues on a town walk, where one part of the walk had a hill, and she has knee issues. So he petitioned the town to add a walkway, like made out of, a relatively crude, but, staircase of sorts, using like logs and stuff. And anyway, he got approval to do that. And so he got his Eagle Scout Award for that. And he also works at a burger joint. He loves to tinker. The colleges, for future engineers, they like to see evidence of that. That's a good way to show they have an engineering mind. It's not the only way, but it doesn't hurt. And he also prides himself on a never give up attitude. So we're going to take all these different elements that I just mentioned about Jack, and going to show how it can be reduced down to one sentence, and it could be a sentence that the student uses like as their elevator pitch in an interview. It can be the basis of what they're trying to fill the Common App with. And from a sentence like this, an admissions officer would reduce it down even more tightly if they're taking notes, if they have to go to committee on the student. So I wrote that Jack is a tinkerer, problem solver, activist, and Eagle Scout with a sense of humor and empathy, who uses his engineering abilities and can-do attitude to help his community. So based on all of this, 650 words are in the Common App. Essay, that's the max amount of words a student can use. And I'm going to show how 2 different ways that Jack could write an essay. So we talked about the montage essay, that hamburger type of stacking. And so Jack could use his stick-to-it attitude and desire to help others, sitting on the bench of a soccer game. And he's not the greatest player. In his Common App, I wrote that he's a bench warmer extraordinaire as one of his activities. And he is sitting there cheering the team on. And as he's sitting there on the bench, which he's, used to being there, he starts reflecting on ideas. So one of the things colleges like to see is like grit. So he's able to just sit on the bench and be part of the team, but he also loves to tinker with his father, and he doesn't give up when he's facing a problem, like how is helping his grandmother's knee problem with the Eagle Scout project when she wanted to go on her walk. So these are things he could be thinking about while he's on the bench, and then he could add possibly some new things that we don't know about him. Because it's in the Common App, it can be good not to repeat yourself that much. Bringing in new ideas and showing different aspects of a student's life can be helpful, but they should hopefully support what the message is. So it could be a physics class project that he wanted to go into more detail about, or the fact that he sets up study groups for a math class after school. So that's a way to expand it. And then he would come back to soccer being on the bench, and maybe his team has won and he's all excited and, jumping up with the team, in that he's part of the team, even though he hasn't done a lot to support them on the field, but he supports them through his, enthusiasm. But then he could be thinking about the future of where he wants to go with his engineering, and how he might want to make a difference in the world. So that's an idea of a montage essay. Now, a chronological type essay, Jack could be focusing on his engineering, but opening with a story, maybe he's around 9 and he has all these pieces of a small appliance lying about him, and he's trying to figure out how to put it back together. And he's not going to give up on it. And again, showing grit that way. I have a lot of young men start writing about Legos, how they loved Legos when they were young, but they might spend, 60% of the essay on the Legos. They have to quickly move away from the Legos. And there's nothing wrong with the Legos, but it is relatively common. So it might be, if they're really into building things, maybe there's something else they've been building. I had a young woman who loved to build models. So she built, like, out of paper, like, or cardboard, I think, like the Taj Mahal, for example. She had built, I don't know, like 15 different models of famous, building sites. And anyway, it was just different. So she wanted to be an engineer, and that became part of her essay. And again, we were just talking, and that came out. So his chronological essay could then progress to highlighting other challenging projects in high school, quickly getting older. I said in the Common App that he is working on an old Camaro, I think like a 1990 Camaro, with his father. So that's really neat. And then he could bring his grandmother's knee problems in again here, and how he used the problem-solving abilities to help her have the accessibility with the walk again by building the stairs. And then the chronological essay could finish with bigger projects he's excited to tackle in college and life. And his college-specific essays, if he's applying to more competitive colleges, will only strengthen and support his narrative and can weave in other stories. So if extra writing space is needed, there is the challenges and circumstances section. It's 250 words. It used to be the additional information section, which was 650 words, which the Common App has shortened. And so if a student is having an issue with a drop in grades, an illness, a class conflict where they weren't able to take a class they wanted to, this would be the place to do it. So I just wanted to let people know there is extra writing, and that's going to be very to the point. It's not going to be storytelling involved. It's going to be tight. So that is, if you feel there's something important, it doesn't necessarily have to be put into the personal statement. This is a space to address other concerns. So wrapping up, this is our optimal timeline for essays in the Common App. So starting now, beginning to brainstorm, just talking about it. They don't have to start writing, but letting ideas percolate. If they're one of them outline a bit of an essay, that would be great too. And then the idea of just planning the narrative of, like, what is it that broadly that the student wants to convey to the colleges about themselves, and how can these maybe be tied into different parts of the application. So, writing drafts over weeks. Writing is rewriting. It takes time, and it's not something they're going to do in one day and be done, because it really needs to sit. They need to come back to it in a few days or a week with fresh eyes, and see that, that really doesn't read that well, or that really isn't as clear as I'd like to make it. And 6 to 8 drafts are very commonplace. And so that's in May and July. And then in July and August, they can start compiling a list of supplemental essays and scholarship essays. So August 1st is when the Common App opens, and the colleges are supposed to, the supplemental essays are supposed to be fixed and be the right ones. Sometimes they aren't done with them. And right now, some of them, the colleges have posted on their websites or through social media what the supplemental essays they're going to have this year are going to be. So, sometimes they don't change them from year to year. So students can look at what the essays were for last year in the Common App. They can open up an account now, and it might change, but they can just get an idea of start thinking about some of the essays they might have to write. And a lot of common ones are, again, why this major, why this college, and a really common one now is like a community essay. What type of community are you involved in? Is it church? Is it a soccer team? Is it math club? Is it a baking club? Is it your family? Is it your religion? Well, I said church, so similar idea. Anyway, so that is community, and that's a very common essay. And so September, November, finish the early apps, like University of Pittsburgh opens up August 1 is when that you can submit an application, and they have rolling admissions. And the more competitive majors are harder to get into. The earlier they apply, the more, better chance they have. So get the rolling admissions done early. It's great for a student to have an early win. It really helps boost their ego. It makes them see they will be going to college. And so your early decision and your early action schools a lot of them are due November 1 or November 15th. Some schools have October deadlines. So check the deadlines and prioritize the early ones. And then in November, January, continue finishing the other regular decision applications, which are usually due January 1 or January 15th. And with those, there's probably gonna be a lot of supplemental essays because your more competitive colleges tend to have regular decision dates. And more colleges are having early action dates, but like all your much more competitive schools tend to still have, besides like one early action restrictive or an early decision, the majority then, after you choose that one college, then you have to do maybe 5 to 7 essays per college, depending upon how competitive it is. So just keep in mind that that's a lot of work. And also there's scholarships. There could be scholarships, honor colleges, or essays are additional work. And then there might be additional scholarship essays, whether they're for a college or just for the community to have more money to go to college. And those are, that's that.
Yeah,
And
to add one thing to Ellen's comment there, my best advice here for the parents on the call who went to college in the US yourself, don't assume anything is the same it was when you went to college. And the second part of that advice is, don't be surprised if every college your child is interested in has a different requirement or a different deadline. So there could be some colleges that they apply to that they'll be considered for all merit scholarships based on their admissions application alone. Nothing additional needs to be done. That might be true for college A, B, and C. But college D says, oh, by the way, you actually need to write an additional essay for the scholarships at our school. And it's not that college D is trying to be a pain in the neck or discourage your son or daughter. It's just the way their process is at their school. And so every year I talk to families who are surprised when one or more schools does things a little differently or has a different deadline. It's a lot of work to stay organized around this, but it's worth it to make sure that your sons and daughters are not missing out on an opportunity.
And just to kind of pick up on what Terry's saying, that is the other reason why, if you can start this process early and just kind of get your arms around, the schools that your student is going to apply to and what all their different requirements are. I mean, I think, they've sold a bill of goods, which isn't true when they termed it the Common App, because it makes it sound like there's only, one process that all the colleges follow. I mean, there is this common essay that helps. But as you can hear what, Ellen talked about, each school might have one, may have two, might have three additional essays. Each school might have a different deadline if you want to apply to merit scholarships versus, you want to apply early decision versus you want to apply regular. So kind of getting your arms with, you're helping your student get their arms around all the deadlines, all the different essays that they have to write, and how are they going to fit that in with, fall and school. And again, that's why, we emphasize as much as possible that students start this over the summer. It will just be a huge relief for them and for you. I have rarely seen, and you can chime in, a student who completely finishes everything over the summer, but at least if they could get like a good chunk of their essays done, particularly the Common App done over the summer, the fall just goes much smoother because it's just so hard to predict, what their other classes are going to be like, what their activities, in school are going to be like. And then you layer on, having to do college applications, which is basically another course you can kind of think of. It becomes, a lot of work for students and pretty, stressful for the family.
Yeah, so I'm done with my part of the
Oh,
the
you know what,
talk.
Ellen, you can go back because I think we sent out, there's a different offer that's going.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. All right.
And then Terry, I wouldn't mind, because there were a lot of questions in the chat, still a little bit about AI. One thing you mentioned, another conversation that you didn't bring up tonight, which is if colleges are like reviewing essays to see if they have been written through AI, and then how they might differ in terms of a reaction if they find out through some, AI, indicator that they feel like it was written by AI.
Sure. So, I think one of the things that's challenging for all of us as AI takes assumes a larger presence in our lives, is knowing kind of how do we evaluate whether something's been a student's own work. And for many years, there's a part of the Common Application where a student signs a statement saying that it does represent their own work. So this is important for students to know. They're kind of putting their name to documents that are saying this is mine. I did not cheat on this. And really, for many years was about the fact that they had written their essay on their own. It wasn't an essay that another classmate had written for them or something like that, or they weren't using their older brother's essay that he used when he applied to college. But I think that what I have found is that the schools I've been affiliated with, if they think that an application essay has been written using AI and not edited by the student to actually make it personal to them, they will do one of at least three things. One is just to contact the student and ask them to submit another essay. Or a graded paper from a class that they have taken in high school. The second is to do an interview. Usually, it doesn't have to be an in-person. It might be on the phone or on Zoom, but where they talk about their writing process, how they got the idea for their essay, how they went about it, who they consulted with, how many drafts they wrote. And I will tell you, having worked last year at Beloit College in Wisconsin, and Beloit is a school that does admit the majority of their students. There were, I think, 4 students who we contacted about their essays. One of whom I remember very clearly immediately said, I didn't write it at all. I used AI. I was in a hurry. I didn't put the time in. I'm sorry. May I submit another essay that I will write myself? And we let him do it. We were actually pretty pleased with how forthright he was, and how he took ownership for something that he had done to cut a corner. We used it as a teachable moment. We know that these are young people. They're in a we're all in developmental stages of our lives, I guess, but we wanted to not punish him for his honesty, but instead to give him another opportunity. There are some colleges who, if they put it through an AI tester and it says, 90% chance this was generated through AI, are likely never to follow up with the student, but would put them into the deny pile. And so you need to know that there's not any assurance that if an essay is suspected to be AI, that there will in fact be follow up and a second chance given. I think it really depends on the particular institution. But again, it can be, I feel strongly that it can be used as a tool, not dissimilar to having a tutor or your teacher or a parent or an older sibling advise you on something, but it has to be not in place of the student's voice and the student's effort.
Ellen, there was a question about, and I'm kind of curious because you've worked with so many students and sometimes, with parents, your advice to parents about how involved they should be in helping their student, write the essay. And this could vary.
Yeah, it depends on the relationship. I mean, some parents have too much of a heavy hand, and I can tell they've been writing it, I can see their edits. The language that they're using is not a 17-year-old's language. Parents can get very anxious in this process, and the essay is one of the things they feel they can put their hand on. And it undermines the student's confidence. It can create more stress in the family that's already there. Yeah, it's a challenging. This is a very. I've been through it twice with my daughters. It's a stressful time, and so some parents work better with their students, and they'll brainstorm and might edit. Like I edited my daughter's essays, but yes, it needs to be their voice, and just be mindful it's their process. So that's my advice.
Okay. Well, any other questions that people want to put in chat? We can probably answer a few more, but this was really helpful. I hopefully families get the sense of how colleges are viewing, the essay in the process. I personally love Terry, the explanation about understanding that colleges are, academic institutions first. So, a lot of times that's the way the college is going to look at a student's application. Can they academically handle it here? And then they'll go on, to the essay. I mean, honestly, we emphasize that just so that people understand. I think this is fantasy, particularly maybe from the movies, that every essay, gets reviewed and they admissions officers sit around the table and they're discussing every single application, and that's just not the case these days. But if your student gets through that first hurdle of academics, then their essay becomes very important. So it's kind of this balance between knowing where they're applying, how competitive the school is that they're applying to, and knowing when their essay is going to make a difference. But of course, your student should kind of put their best foot forward in anything they're going to send to the college, but just recognizing, it may or may not always be read, but in some cases, it actually may be the thing that kind of puts them over the edge in a good way.
There's a question in the chat that may relate to several families here about whether writing about sports is okay in an essay. And I will say it is one of the things that is most common. And so it is a harder topic, I think, to be distinctive in writing about. If I had $100 for every popped ACL essay I've read in my career, I would have retired years ago. It's a very common thing. It's the last minute of the game, but it's also, it's not always athletics. It can also be the play, or it can be the concert. So it's not specifically athletics. I think that sports is a fine topic for a student for whom that's important, but it needs to be some specific element or a specific lesson learned or a specific relationship developed or, you know, and I've read really wonderful essays where a young person writes about their interest in a sport that was developed because of a relationship with a grandparent who introduced them to that sport when they were a little kid, and that there's a whole sort of again sort of insight into the person, but sports is the kind of framework that the story is written through. So sports are not off limits, but the answering that question, could anyone else have written this essay, I think is a really important one when you're writing about a topic that's quite commonly addressed.
You know, one example I once heard an admissions officer say is that imagine that there was a pile of applications and they kind of all fell to the ground, you know, and they didn't really know whose name was associated with which application. But if they picked up the application and read it, is it clear that, you know, that application is from, you know, your particular student? So like, you know, as Terry is saying, you know, does their personality or whatever that they feel is important to express to the college, is that coming through, you know, kind of regardless of the medium or the topic that they're using? Okay, yeah, Ellen, I just was going to ask you if you can just address a little bit the question about challenges and circumstances. And you said it, but people might not have really heard it in that this is the first year, well, they changed the name for that question. It used to be called just additional information, and it was 650 a word count. Now it sends 250. I have no idea. I'm just kind of hypothesizing that they might have changed it because a lot of people were using that section maybe unnecessarily. And then, you know, 650 words is it's a whole nother essay. And they truly want people to purposely use this section now. And that's why they probably renamed it and cut the word count down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some people would upload a resume, or
Yeah.
they had another supplemental essay they really liked and they just wanted to share it. So they would put it there. And yeah, I'm sure Terry can speak to it also.
Mm-hmm.
So more is not always better in this
Right.
process. I would really kind of like use the guidelines that each college gives you, and you know, and that's a little bit of the challenge is that your student needs to get across who they are and what the college is asking for.
Yeah. And someone just asked whether it can be left blank. Absolutely. This is really it is the most optional piece, I think, on that on the Common Application, and really intended to give voice to something that is important in understanding a circumstance. I could think of a good one I just read this year where a student wanted to explain that they had changed high schools because their school had closed. And so we would never have known that if the student hadn't addressed it, because the counselor who was from the new high school didn't talk about that in their letter of recommendation. So it's important to use when there's something relevant to share. It is absolutely fine to leave it blank.
And it can also be under the additional information section umbrella, and the name's a little different. But like if a student won an award and they really needed to explain like that 2,000 people applied for it and they, you know, had to be, you know, have 5 interviews for it, that type of detail can be helpful to know. So I'm assuming, Terry, would you say that something like
Yes.
that could still be put under there? Or,
Certainly.
you know, yes, so that's just an example of how it can be used in another way. It doesn't have to just be challenges. The circumstance could be like, wow, this is the circumstance about how I came about to win this award.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Terry and Ellen. Thank you, everyone, for showing up tonight. You'll get a link to the recording. We do have, honestly, I don't know the details, but there is like a little deal that's going to be emailed tonight and tomorrow if you want help with working with your student, whether it's on the essay, we didn't really go into depth on the Common App. That's going to be in another few sessions, but we can provide help with the essay and the Common App, which is a really good and important kind of package together. And also sometimes a lot of people want just help, honestly, in looking at their college lists and kind of like bringing all the pieces together. Just, yeah, and I encourage families to do as much as they can on their own, but then sometimes you get to a point where you just want somebody else to take a look at everything that you've done and making sure that you're going down the right path, that you haven't missed including a school, that you're understanding the costs properly, all these things. And particularly we do help a lot of families and a lot of students with the essay because, you know, it's hard to write the essay, as we've talked tonight. It's hard on the parent-child relationship, and sometimes, you know, someone like Ellen, who has, how many essays have you like helped with and reviewed?
Over 2,000 essays I've edited. Yeah.
1,000. So, you know, with that type of experience, you know, Ellen can quickly, you know, suss up, you know, the direction of an essay, or just talk to your student to kind of pull out what's the most important thing to write about. So we're here for all those different ways that we can help you and your student. Okay, so somebody's asking about the pricing. Honestly, that was an old slide. You'll get information in an email. So just if you don't mind looking at your email, there'll be one that's might be sent out tonight, but definitely tomorrow, and we'll have more details on the different ways and the prices that we can work with people.
And the Common App, we can do the Common App. We're going to do in July, starting that.
Yes.
So
So
wants to know when we'll do that.
yes, July
Yeah.
and August and September, we have the essays on the, sorry, we have the webinars on the Common App. But as Ellen recommended, absolutely go to the Common App now. I don't even know if you said this, Ellen, but you can create an account now, and then it will roll over. So really good for your student to see, you know, all the questions that they're going to ask in the Common App. Again, just to kind of plant the seed, and so that they can gather their information together, and knowing that they're going to have to put it in the different sections of the Common App.
And they can also search, show, and demonstrate interest by putting the colleges they're interested in into their Common App. And they will get a little ding saying that they have been selected. So
Explain that a little bit more, Ellen. So people may not understand what you're saying exactly.
Yeah. Well, they can put in 20 colleges. So they can, if they know what their list is, they can start putting, Terry, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, we won't get it until it rolls over.
Oh, sorry, we won't roll. We're so fine. That's
August
fine. Thank you for
1st we would
clarifying.
get it.
But August 1st, they'll get it immediately. Got it. I know that I know if they start filling out the college specific section, I know that doesn't roll, but I didn't know they didn't get the ding before August 1st. Okay, fine. So August 1st, they'll get the ding, but it's very simple to roll over. They just have to go back in the Common App and say, yes, I'm rolling it over. It's as simple as that. Nothing will be saved in the college specific section, but the colleges they chose will be saved. And that's how they can look and see what last year's Common App, this college specific essays were last year.
And to just explain what the colleges see on August 1st, when the new cycle opens, we will be able to access the information of students who have listed our college specifically as a college that they are interested in. We won't be able to see what other colleges those students have listed. We won't have specific information about those students, but we can send a message out to them should we choose to. So I'm working, as Debbie said, with RPI right now. On August 1st or August 2nd, RPI could look at students who are going to be entering their senior year who have listed RPI as one of their schools they're interested in as of that date. It doesn't mean they've said they're going to apply. It doesn't commit them to anything. But we could then send out a message from RPI saying, hey, we see that you're interested from the Common App. Let us know if we can help you arrange a visit to campus or whatever it might be. So it is, I just want to assure people it's not betraying anybody's confidence. We don't know what other colleges a student's considering.
I assume you just get their name and email address. You're obviously you're not getting anything else if they might have
exactly
into the Common.
And then students will ultimately take colleges off that. Most students will have a bigger list of schools that they're interested in initially, and then will either reduce that and decide they aren't going to apply to XYZ college, or they might still apply to the same number, but they'll replace them as they do a campus visit or as their interests get more well honed as time goes on. So again, we're not in any way making an assumption that all of the students who list us initially will ultimately apply.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Terry and Ellen, and we'll be here. It's the start of the season. So, okay, good night, everyone. See you soon.